When we mention Vikings, the first image that springs to mind is clear. Dragon-headed ships emerging from the mist, bloodthirsty barbarians wearing horned helmets, leaping ashore with giant axes in hand. However, this cinematic picture presented by pop culture is merely the tip of the iceberg, and often a misleading one. When viewed through the lens of historical and archaeological data, this era of Scandinavia was not simply an age of plunder. It was an age of complex social structures, deep spirituality, and global trade networks. In fact, even the word Viking does not denote an ethnic origin, but rather an action, a profession. In Old Norse, it is a verb meaning to go on an expedition. This means not every Scandinavian was a Viking. Only those who set sail and chose this risky life earned that name. In this video, we will go beyond the clash of swords to witness how these people perceived the world, how they communed with unseen forces, and how they initiated the greatest globalization movement of their time. When we peel back the mask of barbarism, the civilization that lies beneath will astound you. Contrary to popular belief, the heart of Viking society was not the deck of a ship, but the massive wooden structures known as the hall. These longhouses were not merely places of shelter, they were the centers of political power, religious rituals, and social alliances. The power of a chieftain or local ruler was measured less by his success on the battlefield and more by his generosity within his own hall, by the magnificence of the feasts he hosted and the gifts he distributed. Within these halls, society adhered to a hierarchy defined by sharp lines. At the very top sat the ruling class. In the middle were the free farmers, the backbone of society. And at the bottom lay a massive class of slaves, whom history often overlooks. The invisible engine of the Viking economy was, in reality, built upon this slave labor. Behind the heroism recounted in the sagas stood this silent mass, spinning the wool, ploughing the fields, and constructing the halls. Thus, the Viking world was not a romantic brotherhood where everyone was equal and free, but a rigid class society where power and status were constantly on display. The way these people perceived the world was fundamentally different from the rational mindset of the modern era. For them, there was no boundary between the physical and the spiritual realms. Both were intertwined, tangible realities. War and magic were not separate concepts, but two sides of the same coin. In particular, the practice of magic known as Seda, primarily associated with women, was accepted as a power to foresee the future, manipulate fate, and even alter the course of battle. Warriors did not rely solely on muscle power. They also believed in the ability to shapeshift. They held the conviction that by donning the pelt of a bear or a wolf, they borrowed that animal's spirit and fury. This belief system instilled in them a superhuman courage on the battlefield. In their eyes, the world was a living organism where humans, gods, giants, and spirits were in constant interaction, a place where every tree and every river possessed a memory. In the Viking belief system, death was not a biological conclusion, but rather a spatial relocation. Therefore, funeral ceremonies were complex and magnificent operations of dispatch designed to prepare the deceased for the other world. The famous ship burials uncovered in archaeological excavations stand as the most concrete proof of this belief. Burying a ship in the earth might seem like a great waste from a modern perspective, yet for them, this ship was a literal vessel destined to carry the deceased to realms beyond the waves. The weapons, horses, food, and even sacrificed servants placed within the tomb were essential provisions needed for the destination. The afterlife was viewed as a direct continuation of one's status in this world. If you lived like a king here, you were expected to enter the other side as a king. These rituals aim to ensure the journey of the departed, while serving as a potent reminder of their power to those left behind. History books often characterize the Vikings by their raids to the west, along the shores of England and France. However, when we turn the compass to the east, a far more complex picture emerges. The Swedish Vikings, known as the Rus, utilized river systems like superhighways to descend all the way to the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea. Their objective was not merely plunder, but trade. The connections they established with centers of Islamic civilization, like Baghdad and Constantinople, which they called Miklagard, or the Great City, funneled immense wealth into Scandinavia. Tens of thousands of Islamic silver coins discovered in graves serve as proof of just how colossal this trade network was. The Vikings traded wax, furs, and slaves in exchange for silk, spices, and silver. They were merchants and mercenaries who transcended borders, bridging the furthest corners of the known world. What brought the Viking Age to a close was not an invading army from without, but a cultural and political transformation from within. The spread of Christianity across Scandinavia and the consolidation of central kingdoms slowly tamed that ancient, independent, and rebellious spirit. As church teachings replaced old beliefs, ship burials gave way to simple Christian graves, and local tribal chieftains were supplanted by kings believed to be anointed by God. To go a Viking, that is, to organize independent raids, became an act either forbidden or deemed unnecessary by the strengthening royal authority. The slave trade dwindled, borders solidified, and Scandinavian societies began to integrate into the feudal structure of Europe. While this process marked the death of a lifestyle, it was also the birth pangs of the modern Scandinavian nations we know today. In conclusion, to label the Vikings merely as warriors is to do them a grave injustice. They were engineers who pushed the boundaries of timber technology, merchants who traded across continents, poets with a rich oral tradition, and mystics who believed in a complex cosmology. Their legacy lives on, not just in the images of brute force found in pop culture, but in the cities they founded, the trade routes they opened, and within the genetic and cultural map of Europe. When we remove the helmet and gaze into their minds, we see a dynamic society that blended the struggle for survival with art, brutality with faith, and the thirst for exploration with compass. What we have shared today is the story of the real people behind those misty seas. Now, I ask you, did the Scandinavians truly win by bowing to European kingdoms and accepting Christianity to become civilized? Or, by losing that ancient, wild yet limitless spirit of freedom, did they actually suffer the greatest defeat of their history? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Today, we ventured beyond the axes and shields to take a journey into the mind of a civilization. If you enjoyed this exploration through the dusty pages of history, please like the video and don't forget to subscribe to secure your place on our next expedition into the depths of the past. Turn on the notification bell so that the legacy of ages may reach you.